was chopping it up with a friend. I was remarking on the Fuji X Pro 2. And we really got sucked into the conversation because he has a Fuji X Pro 2. And I was telling him about my experience when I first shot with that camera. And that was my first ever Fuji. And I have it documented on this channel. And I think it was such a special experience for me. It was such a, I would call it like an awakening. Because I was squarely in the camp of Sony, right? And I came from Canon. And then I was also in this love affair and getting to appreciate Micro Four Thirds. Not so much Oni Olympus, but also Panasonic. And I didn't think it was possible to really fall in love with another set of tools because I'd had so many around. But yeah, the first time shooting the X Pro 2 was so special to me. And we were talking about it and he offered, he said, yo, why don't you, it sounds like it's been a while since you shot with that camera. So why don't you hold on to mine for a few days? And it was such a, I was very thankful for the opportunity, and I had it for about a week and some change, and I did some purposeful work with it. And it's still to this day so special, right? For so many different reasons. So when I initially shot with that camera, it was the 35 millimeter equivalent lens. This time around, it was the 50. And I got some thoughts on a 50 because I recently went out and purchased a 50 for my Olympus to investigate the focal length some more. But yeah, what the images you guys are seeing here is a lot of, well, all of the 50 and the X Pro 2. And like I said, it continues to be such an amazing experience, such a great camera. It just reeks of quality, and I find that any Fuji camera I've held or used, and I think this is echoed in the community, not only amongst Fuji enthusiasts, but like anyone really, Fuji has this thing, you know, we complain that Sony's and the latest entries of Canon and Nikon venturing into mirrorless, we complain that they can feel like these soulless tools. Fuji is not that. There's something about Fuji that, you know, it calls to you. Wherever you have it on the shelf, you look at it, it catches your eye, and it just incites this need to create within you. And it's an experience that can't be understated. Like, I really love shooting with Fuji cameras. Even the way they operate, right? In terms of the aperture dial is actually on the lens, and there's all these tactile buttons, and it gives this very mechanical and purposeful feeling to the experience of exercising your knowledge on the exposure triangle and exercising how you choose to create and capture your subjects. So yeah, there's a few things that stood out to me still to this day, going back to the X Pro 2. And even though it's up there in age, it's no less of an amazing tool and experience. First is like the look of the camera. It's such a handsome camera, right? And spoiler alert, I'm digging into film these days. More on that to come soon. And once you go back, you look backwards towards what film is and what film photography and film cameras, that whole thing, you start to get this appreciation for the craftsmanship that from yesteryear, right? And you start to look at things like Nikon and how their film cameras are so beautiful, but they're so functional, right? And I don't know this to be true of Nikon. I've never actually looked at them today with a lot of their mirrorless entries through that critical eye. I'm sure it is. Some Nikon enthusiasts out there would love to have that conversation with me, and I welcome it. Fuji carried over a lot of that purposeful design, that vintage aesthetic, that premium materials, like all metal. Like when you pick up the X Pro 2, not only does it look good, it just feels good. And that's, you know, my workhorse and my professional side of the fence is a Sony A7 IV. And that shit don't feel like beauty. It feels like utilitarian. It feels like to get the job done. And that's what it's supposed to do. That is what it's supposed to do. And this Fuji, this X Pro 2 just feels like the camera's having a conversation with you. It feels like the camera's saying, yo fam, you looked over here. What you doing right now? Let's go create, right? Like I feel like that's such a special thing for a camera to embody. And then there's the handling. The X Pro, my main Fuji camera, my only Fuji camera is the X Pro, the X-T2, which is sort of the sister to the X Pro 2. And it handles in a very different way. It handles in a more utilitarian way. It handles more of a professional way. And I would say the X-T2 is a little more comfortable for me to hold, but the X Pro 2 is right under it, right? And not only that, but there's trade-offs. And no, the X Pro 2 isn't as comfortable as the X-T2, but given how much more handsome it is to look at, I'm alright with that. Plus, this particular loadout that I borrowed from my friend, he has the thumb grip. And I find that the thumb grip is such an amazing way to counteract some of that weight and balance, particularly because the viewfinder for the X Pro 2 is a little off to the left. So it can feel, I don't want to say clunky. If you're not familiar with shooting range finder style cameras, it can be a little bit of an uphill battle to get comfortable with having the viewfinder all the way to the left and not in the middle, right? But you'll adjust. The shit is dope, trust me. One other thing that stood out about it was the ISO shutter dial. I think a lot of people have some qualms with this because Fuji is really known for, they're known for putting functions on dials. And this is an example where, for the sake of design, they may have compromised functionality. And I find that it can be a little cumbersome to use, particularly if you're one to either need to adjust your ISO pretty quickly or often, and or your shutter. For me, it wasn't particularly an issue because when I'm doing a lot of my street photography work or just outdoor work in general, I use shutter priority. Like, I don't care about the shutter speed, right? Like, let the camera pick that. We're outside. I know my shutter speed is never really gonna fall below like a 1/180th for God knows what reason, right? And then also, like, I run auto ISO, and I run auto ISO all the way up until like 6400. And that's because not only am I not invested in exercising how I understand the exposure triangle, I don't give a shit. That's something like a lot of snob photographers trick you into believing you must know. And I will say it's nice to know because sometimes a camera doesn't make the best decisions, but also you need to know how the camera is making those decisions, and you need to understand the conditions in which you're shooting. And then sure, so here's a contrast. If I'm taking or I'm doing something indoors and there's subjects, there's people moving, I will not use shutter priority. I will lock my shutter in at 1/125th or 1/100th. And that tells me that, sure, people are always going to be sharp. And then I'll continue to lean on ISO, and I'll adjust my aperture to get as much light as I need, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, the shutter and ISO on that one dial, and I think it's a great bit of ingenuity. I like how it operates, but I can see how it gets in the way for some photographers. Doesn't really bother me. And my last real standout about this camera and this experience is it's that hybrid viewfinder. Like, yo, that shit is dope. Like, I can't even explain it to you. Like, it's got the EVF, but you can still see the entire frame through an actual viewfinder that's just glass. And then it's overlaid with your digital viewfinder. So it's this nicety of, it'll show you what the focal length equals what you're looking at versus the entire scene. So you get this extra opportunity to recompose your shot when looking through the viewfinder, when given the context of the entire scene you can see through the viewfinder. So I quite like it. I think I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a novel thing, because it actually is quite useful, particularly in street photography. Is it a necessary thing? I don't think so. But yeah, going back and shooting with the X Pro 2 is such a, again, I thank my friend, because it's such an amazing experience to be able to come full circle with. And I have not rewatched my original video. I'll link it down below for you guys if you're interested to check out. But this camera was so special to me that it struck a chord. And I kind of remember everything I said in that video, because immediately after picking up the camera, I remembered everything that formed that connection to it. Like, it's all still real. It's all still relevant. And I think Fuji really hit it out of the ballpark with the X Pro 2. So much so that I'm looking into an X Pro 3 to see what that looks like. I've also really thought about just not going X Pro 3 to stay X Pro 2, because there's this thing where this was the pinnacle of Fuji's innovation and manufacturing in Japan. So the camera, the materials that they use in the X Pro 3 aren't the same as the X Pro 2. And I know a little bit of this because I thought about upgrading my XT2. But when I started to dig into, lean on the community to really explain the differences between the cameras, the XT2, geez, so many names, is actually a better built camera. And at this point, I'd only really be jumping to get some of the new film simulations, which I think is kind of the only downfall of shooting with the, damn, what is it? What is the sensor on this thing? The X-Trans 3, I think it is. But I don't get any of the new simulations, and I quite really like the Reala Ace. It is a beautiful simulation. But I got a custom recipe on there, right? Like, if you really want it, you can make it work. So yeah, I think I may land at purchasing an X Pro 2, or maybe put it on a birthday list or something. I think it'll be an amazing camera to add to my collection. And if you guys haven't shot with the X Pro 2, it's such an amazing experience that awaits you, right? Like, there's the rangefinder style, there's the tactile feel to it if you've never shot with Fuji, there's the heft and the quality of the materials, and then there's the film simulations that are in there, and then still there's the opportunity to get a lot of the new stuff and via film recipes with Fuji X Weekly. Shout out to that man over there doing his thing, or a group of people, not sure what all is happening these days. And then the hybrid viewfinder is such an amazing thing. Like, you should experience it. I really wish that all enthusiast photographers would take a look at this camera, because it really and truly is something special. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for checking out the video. Time is the most important thing we have in our lives, and I really appreciate it. I do not take it lightly that you've given me some of your time. If you like the video, hit the like, hit the subscribe. There's plenty more things to come in the future. And as you can tell, I like to take my time and really delve into my topics before I come and show up in front of you. So if there's anything you guys would like me to talk about, just leave it in the comment section down below. Feel free to hop in there. I know I got a lot of Fuji enthusiasts on this channel. Hit the comment section down below. My name is Ramon. I'm out of here. Peace.